I am 79 years old, and last Tuesday at exactly 3:45 p.m., the cumulative silence of this house finally became a physical weight, a suffocating pressure that I could no longer ignore. I was in the attic of this 4-bedroom Victorian in Surrey, a house I have spent exactly 41 years polishing, mortgaging, and curating like a sterile museum of my social standing. I was searching for a mundane tax file from 1988, digging through plastic bins labeled Professional Archive, when I saw it, tucked behind a stack of my late husband David's rusted golf clubs, the ones he bought for £1,200 in 1994, and never once swung, was a wooden box. It was wrapped in a brittle yellowed newspaper from September 12th, 1974. Inside was a set of 24 oil paints, still hermetically sealed in their original plastic, their colors vibrant yet imprisoned. I sat down on a dusty cedar trunk, the cold attic air biting at my lungs, and I held those paints for 2 hours. I didn't cry at first. I just felt a profound, bone-chilling cold. I realized that while I had become a senior partner by 1992, earning exactly $125 or $150 a year, the girl who wanted to capture the violet light of a Paris sunset had been buried alive for 5 decades under a mountain of legal briefs. I haven't been living, I've been performing a role written for me by a man who has been dead for 20 years. Let's go back to London, September 1974. I was 23 years old, and I had a letter in my hand that felt like it was glowing, a full scholarship to Paris. I can still taste the cheap bitter coffee from that morning, and the distinct smell of the damp London fog clinging to the pavement outside my father's window. I went into my father George's study. He was sitting in his oversized mahogany chair, surrounded by the heavy, suffocating smell of expensive pipe tobacco. He didn't even look up from his ledger. He just tapped his $400 gold Patek Philippe watch and said, "Evelyn, the Thorntons do not paint pictures for money. We write the laws that govern the people who buy the art. Law school starts in 3 weeks. Don't be emotional. Be useful." Those words were the bars of my cage. I was so desperate for the approval of a man I could never truly please that I went to the garden that night during a light drizzle, and I burned 3 years of my heart. I threw every sketch, every charcoal drawing, every unfinished canvas into the incinerator. I watched the orange flames turn my soul into gray ash, and I told myself I was being mature. I wasn't being mature, I was being a coward. I spent the next 40 years lying to the world, but the biggest lie was the one I told myself in that garden. By 1985, the trap was fully set, and I walked into it with a practiced smile. I was married to David, a safe banker who viewed my art as a charming little hobby that should never interfere with dinner parties. We bought this Victorian house for exactly £85,000, and we spent nearly a year arguing over the perfect shade of eggshell white for the hallway. We were so busy building a stage for our success that we forgot to live inside it. I remember a dinner party in 1987, sitting under a crystal chandelier that cost more than a mid-sized car, wearing a silk dress that felt like a straitjacket. Someone asked me if I was happy. I looked at my reflection in the silver spoon and said, "I'm fine." Fine is the most dangerous word in the world. It's the sound of a heart flatlining. It's the silence between 2 people who have traded their intimacy for a mortgage. David and I were a 2-person corporation, discussing interest rates and insurance premiums, while our dreams withered like neglected plants in the corners of our beautiful empty rooms. We owned the house, but the house owned us. 1992 was the year I supposedly won. I was promoted to senior partner at Thornton & Associates. I had the corner office on the 42nd floor, overlooking a city that looked like a toy set from that height. My salary hit $120,450. I was a success story, but I remember a specific Tuesday in October. We had just won a multi-million-dollar corporate merger case. that had taken 80-hour weeks. My team was popping champagne in the boardroom, but I excused myself and went into the marble-tiled executive bathroom. I collapsed on a floor that cost $200 per square foot. I had a full-blown panic attack. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. I was addicted to the validation of men who didn't even know my favorite color. I was working 70 hours a week to pay for the freedom to buy things I was too exhausted to enjoy. I was chasing a number on a digital screen while my capacity to feel the sun on my skin was shrinking every single day. I had built a skyscraper of achievements on a foundation of lies. My children, Sarah and Mark, grew up in the quiet, sterile shadows of my ambition. I remember Sarah's ballet recital in May 1998. I was there, sitting in the third row, but I wasn't there. I was hunched over my BlackBerry under a silk pashmina, frantically editing a contract for a client in Dubai, whose name I can't even remember today. I missed the exact moment she nailed her first pirouette. I missed the look of desperate pride in her eyes when she looked for me in the crowd, because I was worried about a subclause in a document that ended up in a shredder 2 years later. I bought them expensive gadgets to silence my guilt, not realizing that children don't want a successful ghost. They want a mother who can look at them without calculating a billable hour. I traded their childhoods for a brass title that was unscrewed from my door the moment I turned 65. When I retired, I realized I had 2 children who respected my career, but had no idea how to talk to the woman behind it. In 2005, for our 20th anniversary, David took me to Venice. We stayed at the Hotel Daniele in a suite that cost €1,200 a night. I remember sitting on the balcony overlooking the Grand Canal and realizing we had absolutely nothing to say to each other. We had spent decades discussing logistics, taxes, repairs, schedules, but we hadn't discussed our souls in 20 years. We were 2 strangers in a beautiful city, holding hands for a photo that we'd show to friends to prove we were fine. I wanted to tell him I was dying inside, but I just asked if he'd called the insurance agent. That was the moment I realized that wealth only provides a more comfortable silence, not a meaningful connection. We were millionaires in bank balance, but paupers in love. Retirement in 2012 was not a celebration. It was a slow-motion disappearance. When I walked out of that skyscraper for the last time, the world did not stop spinning for even a second. They replaced me in 48 hours. My legacy was a folder on a hard drive that someone eventually deleted to make space. David and I sat across from each other at the breakfast table in this massive house, and we realized we were roommates who shared a bank account. I had spent 45 years building a castle, only to realize I was the prisoner in the dungeon and the door had been unlocked the entire time. I just never bothered to turn the handle. All the importance I felt at work was an illusion. I was a cog in a machine that didn't even notice I was gone. June 14, 2018. The doctor called at exactly 2:14 p.m., a spot on my right lung. In the clinical white silence of room 402, the $120K salary and the Victorian house felt like dollhouse furniture, useless and small. Death does not care about your resume. It only cares about the version of you that you never let breathe. I sat in that hospital chair and thought about Paris. Not the career I had, but the paintings I didn't paint. I realized that the safe path was actually the most dangerous one because it leads to a cliff of regret that you can't climb back from. I had all the money for treatments, but no money could buy back the time I spent in meetings I don't remember. Last month, I invited Sarah over for lunch. I tried to tell her I was sorry for the BlackBerry years. I wanted to explain that I did it for her future. She looked at me with kind, distant eyes and said, "It's okay, Mom. You were just busy being successful." That sentence hurt more than the diagnosis. She wasn't angry, she was resigned. She had learned to live without me decades ago. I realized then that success isn't what you leave in a bank account. It's the ability to look at your children and know they actually know who you are. I spent my life paying a debt to my father's expectations, And in the end, I went bankrupt in the eyes of my own daughter. I realized I had won a world that didn't matter, and lost the only world that did. Today, my hands shake with a tremor that makes fine lines almost impossible. The oil paints I found in the attic are finally on a canvas. It is a messy, chaotic, and utterly beautiful painting of a Paris sunset, the one I should have painted in 1974. I'm 79 years old, and if I am blessed, I have 10 years left. My message to you is this: stop trading your one precious, irreplaceable soul for a status that will forget you before your funeral flowers have even wilted. The invisible debt is the time you steal from your own heart to pay for a life you don't even like. Don't wait for a spot on a scan to start living. Start your painting today, even if your hands shake. It is only too late when the ticking stops. Subscribe to Last Perspective, and please, for the love of God, stop wasting your light. Make your someday today, because someday is just a graveyard where dreams go to die.